So welcome everybody to our podcast series, Leading in a Climate Changed World. And today it's a great pleasure to be talking to Anna Leidreiter. Anna is the Director for Climate and Energy with the World Future Council. And in that role, she develops and carries out advocacy campaigns for a global transition towards 100% renewable energies. Together with her team, she advises policymakers around the world on how to facilitate the transformation by leaving no one behind. Anna has initiated the Global 100% RE platform and is a founding member of 2 energy cooperatives in the north of Germany. Before joining the World Future Council, Anna gained practical experience in the renewable energy industry as well as in academia, and has lived in Ethiopia, Australia, the Netherlands, and in Brussels. She has authored and co-authored articles and publications on the subjects of climate change and renewable energy and speaks frequently at international conferences. And lastly, she holds a master's degree in international development studies focused on environmental governance from the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So Anna, welcome. Great to talk to you today.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
And of course, the big topic alongside climate change at the moment is the coronavirus. And I wonder if you could start by maybe firstly just telling us a little bit about the World Future Council and what it does and how it operates for those who are not familiar with its workings. And then maybe to make the links between the coronavirus work, climate change. Are these 2 totally different challenges we face? Are they connected somehow? What's been your experience of working with these twin challenges?
Well, thank you for giving me that opportunity, and it's great to be with you today. And I'm actually looking forward to connect with your audience and see their thoughts, and hopefully we come in kind of an at least digital conversation about this topic, because what we're seeing at the moment is that it's a huge dynamic that no one can foresee. So whatever we're talking today is Friday the 10th of April, and the world may look quite differently next week. So I think that needs to be taken into account when kind of judging responses and perspectives. So yes, maybe I briefly introduce the organization that I work for, as some of you may not know as yet. The World Future Council is a global NGO, a global civil society organization. We are a foundation by law, founded by Jacob van Uxkull about, what is it now, 13 years ago in the year 2007. We were founded to bring out a voice to the world that advocates and identifies policy solutions, in fact. So we are looking at what policy frameworks had brought out certain successes, had resulted in sustainability in one way or the other in certain jurisdictions. And then we look at how can this learnings be transferred and replicated in other countries. So we bring together policymakers, mainly actually parliamentarians, because those are the ones that decide over legislations, that decide over budgets, and see how can they actually learn from each other in a peer-to-peer process. We develop tools, concrete policy tools with them and for them to enable them to bring about the change that they can bring about in their constituency. So we're working on with these tools in different topics. I'm heading the climate and energy work, and in particularly we are looking at policy frameworks that enable the transition to 100% renewable energy. We're doing that in different parts of the world, and mainly working on the national level. And connecting this policy framework on 100% renewable energy very closely with the SDGs, with the UN sustainability goals, because the transition to 100% renewable energy unveils actually a lot of opportunities to also meet other SDGs. And we're seeing that in very different terms. For example, in Tanzania, the government had set the goal for themselves, had set the goal to become a middle-income country, to reduce poverty, and by transitioning to 100% renewable energy, they can actually meet this goal. So similar things we're doing in Bangladesh, in Costa Rica, in Uganda, Vietnam, Nepal. So all of these countries are really looking at learnings, at opportunities from other political decision makers. And this work, as you can imagine, has been impacted by the coronavirus quite a lot in the past weeks, because the energy transition is underway across the world. It had gained speed over the past year, in particularly because the climate responses had been quite popular. We had a global movement, especially of young people, really reminding the leaders that they need to act on climate change across the world, which was a great momentum. And this has been kind of taken over by the coronavirus in the past weeks and probably months. So what we're seeing is that this virus doesn't know any borders. It really shows how fragile and vulnerable our health system, basically humanity, is. And it reminds a lot of people, also political decision makers, of the essential work that they need to fulfill for their people to allow life on this planet. And yeah, this is kind of where we see kind of a competition at the moment between awareness and understanding of the coronavirus versus the climate or the climate debate. However, yeah, I mean, now it's not the time to talk about competition at all. Now it's the time to act and reduce the risks for humanity, and making sure, and that's probably my main message here, making sure that whatever it takes to fight the virus and to allow our systems to work again, not fall back into business as usual from before, but actually making sure that all our economic stimulus packages, all our measures that we're taking now to fight the virus, is actually supporting climate mitigation, climate adaptation, that we're not undermining, but actually supporting climate action with these tools.
Right, that's wonderful, thank you. And I'd like to pick up on this opportunity. I mean, it always sounds strange now to talk about the opportunity within the virus when there's so much suffering, and for sure we want to extend our heartfelt compassion around the suffering. And alongside that, it feels like there is an opportunity to not go back to business as usual when this virus has maybe completed its cycle, let's say, or we've come to terms with how to live with it. And I'm wondering how you see that, because I've already heard of some governments who seem to be taking advantage of the opportunity, if you like, of the virus being more center stage, to ditch their kind of climate commitments and say, well, you know, that's not really the issue now, so of course we can't sign up to this, and COP26 isn't happening in Glasgow, so there's a little bit of momentum has maybe kind of lost around the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change gatherings. And whether how you kind of read that in a way. Are more people leaning into the possibility that this is really a game changer for the good, or are people saying, well, maybe now we can marginalize the efforts we're making around climate in order to focus on the virus? How are you seeing that?
Well, I definitely see both opinions, and it's probably too early to lean to one or the other. However, we are doing our best together with our allies to make sure that those that see this crisis as an opportunity, as a disruption to create a better world, are winning. And as you said, our compassion and our thoughts are with those still suffering this. And there are millions of people around the world who are either sick themselves or have close friends and family who are in this. And for all of those people, it's really hard to imagine that there is a world beyond that. And I think that's why, for now, we really need to focus on fighting the virus. However, as you pointed out, and as I said earlier, especially among political decision makers, there are now plans and actually billions and trillions of dollars and euros and pounds that are now unleashed or actually made available for economic development. And we need to make sure that this money enables people to build a climate resilient economy, to build a climate resilient planet, actually. Our societies are very vulnerable, and what we see now in this particular crisis already is that any kind of protection need to be prepared. We need to be prepared for a crisis. And if we're not, then the worst comes to worse. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. Of course, this is concentrated on the health system, but as we can see, everything is intertwined, and climate protection is actually the best preparation that we can take to prevent the worst, also for our future generations or for our children. So this is very, very critical, and I think what we are actually seeing with this massive health crisis and the impacts on our society is the role of a state, the role of politics, actually. In the past, and this has been actually a conversation in the climate debate for decades now, is that markets are the best solution, are the best one to find solutions. Markets can basically fix the system. That has been an overall discourse, and that's why any interference, any control that a state or government is trying to take or to implement has been fought back. And what we're now seeing is that we need a very, very close collaboration between scientists, states, businesses, and public. We can't leave it to one of these groups, and a stable and a stable state, a stable government, politics that actually work in favor of their people are crucial in times where we really need a strong democratic system. And this is, I think, a key learning for all of us that we can also take with us for post-corona times, where we have hopefully more space to fight the climate crisis, and really make sure that we listen to the scientists, that we take them seriously, and that we build policy frameworks that are informed and based on scientific decisions, making sure that all voices are heard and included in building the right societal framework in which we want to live together.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm wondering if you could now become a little more specific in terms of where are you seeing, as you say, you're working more with nation states and with governments, so where are you seeing that kind of joined up thinking, if you like? The virus and climate questions, but also links these different parts of society into a unified response to any of these kind of radical dangers that are on our horizon, or even closer than that at the moment?
Yeah, yeah. So indeed, I would probably not go into the details of how to combine the climate and the corona responses, because that's way too early. In many countries, we're still kind of in the early phases, or in the high peak season, if you like, where measures need to be developed for the corona virus. So I've seen it here in Germany, where I'm based. I've seen it here that there are certain policymakers coming up now, being vocal about how we need to make sure that the money that we spend and the policies that we introduce are not undermining but supporting climate action. So we're seeing that this started in Germany, to a particular degree also in the European Union. But as I said, this is way too early, and we need to make sure that those promises are also kept, and that we hold our policymakers accountable to this. However, as you were asking about kind of where do I see this, I call it calibrated cooperation, and where do I see informed decision-making and inclusive decision-making? Well, as I said, there are a number of countries around the world that were the leaders in the climate action. And you see them mostly in the industrialized world. New Zealand is one that had developed just last year, actually, a great climate plan to be climate neutral by 2050. Unfortunately, countries like New Zealand actually need to be climate neutral much earlier than that. We've seen also the British government coming out with a climate emergency plan or statement, and there are other cities, actually, this is probably where we see most climate action around the world, especially in the industrialized world, that set climate neutrality plans, that set 100% renewable energy goals, and that are way on its way to achieve that. In my own country, Frankfurt is one of the cities that's leading this movement. We have one of our members in the council has done this particular work in Vancouver, one of the probably most ambitious and most holistic climate action plans that we can see around the world. We see a lot of cities and municipalities in Scandinavia. Copenhagen is probably the most popular one, but also smaller ones in Sweden like Växjö or Oslo in Norway. There is a lot of learnings from these jurisdictions, from these policymakers, and what really struck us across the different examples that you can see in the industrialized world is no city, no country can actually tackle climate change without a holistic and coordinated approach. So all of these cities and countries, they have built their plans on combined systems. So they looked at electricity, heating, transport as a combination. They're not only tackling, for example, the electricity sector by building up lots of solar power, PV, or wind, but they're actually doing sector coupling. And this is very, very crucial because many people are actually looking only at electricity when they think about the energy transition. And what we actually need to do is looking at the heating and transport sector as well, and introducing, for example, large shares of renewable energy in an electrified mobility sector or in an electrified heating sector, where we can use the surplus from renewable energy from renewable electricity. And this has been done in many countries. That requires certain policy measures that enable this coordinated efforts. And not all cities can do that, because sometimes the political mandate lays with the national government. And that's why we're bringing them together in one discourse. Maybe one last part is looking at the global south, because there the discussion is quite different. What I was just saying is mostly a discourse that we see in the global north, in the industrialized countries. In the global south, and particularly in countries with very poor infrastructure, the main concern is obviously to eradicate poverty, and building up renewable energy frameworks that enable communities, municipalities, whole nations to provide full access of clean and affordable energy to its people, has been the main motivation for policymakers to work with us. And we've been doing that in different countries. I named them earlier. And what we usually do, and what was very, very useful for policymakers, was we bring in scientists, again, policy, science, interface, we call it, the policy, science, communication is very crucial here. We bring in scientists, we work together in a very inclusive dialogue in multi-stakeholder settings. We develop 100% renewable energy scenarios together with the policymakers, together with grassroots and civil society, with scientists, with businesses that are present in that countries, and make sure that they all come together with the joint vision on how this future for their country, 100% renewable energy future for their country, looks like. What does 100% renewable energy mean in Bangladesh, for example, or in Costa Rica? And we do that in workshop formats and roundtable formats. So now everything needs to go virtual, obviously, in times of Corona. And this is a challenge, but still doable. And these scientists then do their calculations, do their math to calculate how much wind, how much solar, how much geothermal, what's the potential in this particular country, what is the cost to build it up, which are the regions in the country that become kind of the power hubs, where is the most electricity demand, and how does it evolve over time? These are all the questions that we're jointly discussing in this inclusive format. And then we come up with a holistic roadmap that tries to tackle all these different questions. And as I said, Tanzania, Costa Rica, Bangladesh have already worked with us on that, and have been a great, or have showed a great leadership in this regard. And we're excited to kickstart this work in other countries as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful array of insights and great examples that you've given us, Anna. Thank you very much for that. And I wonder if we could just, maybe towards the end of our time now, we could just focus a little bit on two things. Like, one is, how has your work in the World Future Council been redirected by the virus? Like, that's a question that I think many people are carrying. I had a call yesterday with some people who were saying, it's not just like I have to do everything online now, but I start to question, am I doing the right thing with my life? Like, am I redirecting my energy so that I can really make the best contribution that I can make? And I'm just curious whether as an organization, the World Future Council feels like, oh, now actually we need to reorientate our work or our purpose, and also for your work in climate, just on a kind of personal / organizational level. That's one question. And the second question is really about equity, and I'm glad that you started talking about the global south, because it can also feel like the climate emergency was having a disproportionate impact on the global south. Now we have the virus, which also has a disproportionate impact, or is about to, I think, on the global south and on the poor and on the disadvantaged. And there's this kind of constant reinforcement of inequality through these challenges. And I just wonder, maybe we just have to sit and be with that's the reality, but I wonder if there's anything that you can say to that. It's a fairly stark experience sometimes to notice that every crisis that comes disproportionately impacts, of course, in a way, those who are poor, disadvantaged, have less educational facilities, less healthcare facilities, etc. And just where you see the equity question, because you also said, I think in the introduction that I read, it said we want to bring about a transition to renewable energy, leaving no one behind. And maybe you could just speak to that phrase a little bit also.
Yeah. Well, you're making two very relevant points, and they're very much intertwined. So your first question regarding what does the situation currently do to us as a World Future Council, as an organization? Well, as you can imagine, these conversations are just ongoing, and we are still finding its answers. So one of the key questions for us is, yes, you pointed out, are we still doing the right thing? But not in a way that we may change our topics, quite the opposite. We are rethinking our work in the sense that we know that our key audiences, our target group, political decision makers, parliamentarians, are now busy with fighting the virus. And how do we make sure that we can support them? We can support them also in the short term, but how do we make sure that they're not leaving anyone behind in the longer term, and also including future generations, and making sure that they are building the policy frameworks that can last and that have a future for all generations to come. And these are the key questions that we are currently discussing. We are also discussing that with our councillors. We had different video conference calls actually with our members from around the world. And yeah, as I said, there are no clear answers yet. However, I think what holds true in these situations in particular is listening and being connected, even though we can't meet physically. Being connected and yeah, talk to each other regularly to make sure that that we can be of support. One of our key kind of more methodology questions that we are asking ourselves, and that probably many other civil society organizations are asking themselves as well, how do we do effective advocacy work in times of physical distancing? How can we make sure that all these video conferences now that are taking place between leaders, between political decision makers, that civil society is not excluded of that, because obviously we're not invited to a video conference call, but and in physical meetings, in summits, in conferences where these political decision makers usually meet, we try to raise our voice, we try to be present there. And how does that look like in a physical, in a digital world? However, these are questions where we don't know yet how long they will be relevant, because no one knows how long this lockdown will last. And we're trying to build a kind of a double system there for all our different projects, and also for different parts in different worlds, because this may change in Europe, while in the global south it may still come, this wave.
So when you say a double system, you mean a virtual system and a face-to-face system?
In a way, we need to go both ways. Exactly. Yes. And I think there is a chance in this because we can reduce our global footprint a lot by reducing our travel and advocacy work, building relationships, and lobby work has been quite intense in terms of global footprint in the past, because we've traveled a lot to meet these people. And that has always been very relevant and important. And we now see that there might be also other opportunities for that. Your other question that's very much in the heart of our work is, how does the global crisis at the moment impact the global south, and in particular probably widens the gap of inequality. And that's something that is very close to our hearts at the moment, and where we're trying to work with our policymakers, with our network, and making sure that this doesn't happen. However, it's very, very difficult, because obviously there are huge economic interests at the moment. Everyone is suffering. Huge economies, whole industries are falling apart, basically. And we are now developing concrete solutions, concrete proposals for policymakers to invest the money that they are now finding. One must say, there are trillions of dollars suddenly occurring. We try to make sure that this is invested in the renewable energy industry, for example, rather than supporting fossil fuel industry to have another few years of life. But how do we making sure that this money helps to create jobs in the renewable energy industry, in industries that reduce waste on our planet, that increases energy efficiency, that creates jobs also in rural areas and not only in big cities, because that's where people live and that's where people need to build their livelihoods. So this can only go hand in hand with partners. This can only go hand in hand with other, especially in the global south, with development partners. So we are working closely, for example, with a German organization called Bread for the World. We're closely working with civil society organizations in the countries in the global south, because they are kind of anchored, they are in the debate. And we as a global voice, we feed the learnings from other countries. We feed them with these kind of knowledge. This is the work that we are currently doing, and where we are hoping to have an impact. But of course, this requires some kind of at least midterm thinking, because every crisis, and that's true to the Corona crisis as well as the climate crisis, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, and we need to hold breath and make sure that we actually that we are there at the right time with the right solutions. And maybe now it's still a bit too early for many policymakers to make long-term decisions.
But that's a great note to close, I think, because I really want to appreciate the work that you and the World Future Council do in bringing those right policies and right guidelines and best practices to everyone's attention. And I don't know if there's any final message you want to give, but otherwise I think it's been a very comprehensive spanning of the globe that you've managed to do in this 30-40 minutes that we spent together. So I'd just like to thank you for your time and wish you every success in all your endeavors, and also to pass our greetings on to your colleagues in the World Future Council, which I've known about and many of whom I also know personally and have done over the last years. And I want to send greetings to them, and many thanks to you, Anna, for your work and for your time this morning.
I'll pass them on, and thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to this podcast to start a debate with many others around the globe, and particularly in the UK. Thank you.